Hey everyone, Sergeant Arterbraid here, and today we're going to be continuing our series of Napoleon from Epic History TV. We are on Napoleon's Vietnam, Spain, 1807 to 1811. Very interesting. Also, I noticed we got a huge influx of subscribers the last few days, so to all of you who are new, thank you, and be sure to watch my other videos. My newer ones are mediocre, but my older ones are not very good, so please don't watch them. But, yeah, this Spain betraying France betraying their ally was not a good idea. If y'all don't know, because some of y'all just jump to random videos, and if you do, I suggest you watch the full thing, to get the full context. Spain was France's ally for a while, and then France betrayed them. Yeah, it was pretty rude, to be honest. And it turns they got sort of bogged down in this very long war, and the fact that Austria came and defeated Napoleon at a major battle. Yeah, it wasn't good, and it would tie down a bunch of really good troops for the rest of the war. Troops that could have been needed in Russia in the years later, 1812 or something like that. Spain, 1809. Okay. It's a lot of horses.
In 1809, Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor of the French, was at the height of his power. He had just won another crushing victory against Austria at Wagram and imposed a humiliating peace treaty. But the war he'd started in Spain and Portugal, with his ill-judged invasion the previous year, continued to rage. Napoleon had placed his own brother, Joseph, on the Spanish throne, uniting a proud country against him. His troops had dealt ruthlessly with popular uprisings, while routing a succession of Spanish armies. In February 1809, Marshal Lannes overcame the heroic defense of Zaragoza in a brutal siege that cost 54,000 Spanish lives and 10,000 French. But still, the Spanish and Portuguese remained defiant. And 3 months after their escape from Coruña, the British were back. In April, Sir Arthur Wellesley landed in Lisbon to lead a small Anglo-Portuguese army. British redcoats would fight alongside Portuguese troops, who, with the help of British training, would soon prove themselves highly effective.
Oh gosh, that is not what they need.
3 weeks after arriving in Portugal, Wellesley moved against Marshal Soult's Second Corps, which had recently taken Porto. Soult and his troops, preoccupied with plundering the region, had no warning of the British advance, and were soon in headlong retreat, back through the mountains into Spain.
Oh my gosh. Spain is a country where small armies are defeated and large armies starve.
Having secured Portugal for the time being, Wellesley planned a joint campaign with General Cuesta, commanding the Spanish army of Extremadura. On the 10th of July, the two commanders met at Casas de Miravete to discuss strategy. Relations between these two allies were not straightforward. Spain and Britain had a long history of conflict. The Spanish were deeply suspicious of British intentions in Spain, while the British had a low opinion of the Spanish army, which they considered poorly trained and badly led.
Wow, rude.
Wellesley's request.
I also have a little fun fact about Portugal and Britain. Their alliance was literally like the longest alliance ever. It was from the 1500s. I'm pretty sure the alliance started in the 1500s. So, yeah, it was a very, very long time ago. And Portugal even helped Britain out in World War One. Not in World War Two, though. But to be fair, in World War One, they only helped because Germany
to take over command of Spanish forces was rejected. but the generals agreed to a joint advance up the Tagus Valley towards Madrid, to be supported by General Venegas, advancing from La Mancha. In the face of their advance, Marshal Victor's First Corps withdrew to Talavera, where he was joined by King Joseph and General Sebastiani's Fourth Corps. The French plan was for Joseph's army to defend Madrid, while Marshal Soult led 3 corps down from the north to get behind and trap the Anglo-Spanish forces. But Joseph, worried by Soult's slow progress and General Venegas's advance on Madrid, decided to attack at Talavera.
40,000 British troops, some 150 leagues from the sea, against 100,000 of the best troops in the world. My God.
The Battle of Talavera saw British infantry bear the brunt of the French assault.
This is too quiet.
They stood firm and repelled the enemy with disciplined musket fire and bayonet charges.
Wow.
Talavera was a small battle compared to the great clashes fought that year in Austria, but it proved that under Wellesley, Britain's small, well-drilled army was a force to be reckoned with.
Wow.
Even though in the short term, victory achieved little.
French lost more troops.
Approach from captured dispatches, the victorious Anglo-Spanish army retreated, while King Joseph and Fourth Corps marched against Venegas's army, which they smashed at the Battle of Almonacid. That autumn, the Supreme Junta in Sevilla, Free Spain's effective government, raised 2 new armies for another attempt to liberate Madrid.
Oh, goodness.
Planning to converge on the capital from north and south.
This is not
but
good
Wellesley,
for them.
ennobled as Viscount Wellington for his victory at Talavera, had been so disgusted by the lack of Spanish cooperation that summer that he refused to risk his army.
Rude.
Predictably, Spain's inexperienced armies met with disaster.
Oh, you donkey.
At
Why
Ocaña,
would you
they
do that?
suffered their biggest defeat of the war,
What? Donkey?
when a smaller force under Marshal Soult routed the Spanish army, taking
Wow.
14,000 prisoners and 50 cannon.
Jeez.
A week later,
That is
the
not
army of the
good
left
for
was
them.
heavily defeated at Alba de Tormes. There was more bad news when Girona fell to the French after an epic 7-month siege.
7 months.
The Supreme
siege?
Junta's plans
Jeez.
to retake Madrid were in tatters, and southern Spain was now wide open to French attack.
Oh, goodness. They put up a good fight for a while. My object is not to obtain submission by force, but to dispel illusions. I will arrive at a union of hearts. Joseph Bonaparte.
In January 1810, King Joseph marched south with an army of 60,000 men. Spanish resistance evaporated.
Oh my goodness. Are you seeing this? They're just marching completely unopposed. Look how much land they took.
Spain's Supreme Junta was overthrown in a coup, as
That
Cordova
was their-
and Seville
that's their
fell
capital.
without a fight. Joseph, who still hoped to win over the Spanish with his progressive reforms,
Well, you kind of, massacred, the people that resisted you, so that's not helpful.
was welcomed by many as a savior from anarchy.
Oh, okay.
Only Cadiz held out, its defenses reinforced by a British naval squadron, and was besieged by Victor's First Corps. Meanwhile, Napoleon sent Marshal Massena to Spain with 65,000 reinforcements. He was reckoned one of Napoleon's best marshals, and had just been made Prince of Essling for his heroics in the recent war against Austria.
Good job.
Massena was to lead a third French invasion of Portugal, take Lisbon, and chase the British back into the sea. He
That is
laid
not gonna
siege
happen.
to Ciudad Rodrigo, a fortified city controlling one of the main routes into Portugal, which surrendered after 2 weeks' bombardment.
Oh, nice.
Wellington, with only 33,000 men to face Massena's 50,000, retreated. Massena crossed the Portuguese frontier and besieged Almeida. After just 13 hours of bombardment, a lucky French shot hit the Portuguese magazine. 70 tons of gunpowder went up in a devastating explosion that made all further resistance useless.
Wow! That is lucky. Jeez, that is amazing.
It was a serious blow to Wellington, who'd been relying on Almeida's strong defenses to buy him time.
Look at this.
At Busaco, he found a strong defensive position.
It's so weird. It's like there's a certain part of this war where the French just win all these battles. Before that, the French were losing all these battles. It's so weird.
And made a stand.
Oh, never mind.
Massena's uphill frontal attack failed, at a cost of 4,000 casualties.
Oh.
But the next day, the French found a way to outflank Wellington's position, and his retreat continued. As Massena's army neared Lisbon, his scouts reported something completely unexpected.
What? What is it?
Stretching across the Lisbon peninsula, protecting the city from attack, they found a new chain of fortifications in 2 major lines. Known as the Lines of Torres Vedras, the British and Portuguese had been constructing these defenses for more than a year. Now the lines bristled with more than 100 forts, redoubts, and batteries, manned by 30,000 troops and 250 guns.
Wow.
Massena soon discovered the lines were far too strong for him to attack.
You think?
What's more, a scorched earth strategy had stripped the surrounding countryside of anything that might help the French. While Portuguese partisans attacked French supply columns as they struggled through the mountains to reach Massena's army. Massena faced a grim predicament. Starved of supplies, too weak to attack, unwilling to retreat. But throughout this standoff, it was Portuguese peasants who suffered most of all. When their villages and farms were burned, many took refuge in Lisbon, where thousands died of starvation and disease.
So, Prince of Essling, you are no longer Massena? Napoleon to Marshal
Back in France, Napoleon had been preoccupied with his divorce from the Empress Josephine, and then a new marriage to Archduchess Marie-Louise, daughter of the Emperor of Austria. She was now expecting their first child. Nevertheless, from Paris, Napoleon sent frequent orders to his marshals in Spain and Portugal, urging them to take more aggressive action. But when these orders arrived, weeks later, they were usually out of date and showed little understanding of the problems his marshals faced.
He
now ordered Soult, based in Andalusia, to go on the offensive to draw enemy forces away from Lisbon.
Napoleon needs to actually be there in person, like commanding the attack on Lisbon,
so Massena could take the city. Soult laid siege to Badajoz, a fortified city that controlled the southern route into Portugal. When 12,000 men of the army of Extremadura marched to its relief, they were routed by Soult, after which the city tamely surrendered, giving up 8,000 prisoners and vast quantities of stores.
That is not good for them.
It was another heavy blow to Spain's armed forces. Remarkably, despite such disasters and their many blundering generals, the Spanish troops remained willing to fight, the courage of the rank and file undimmed.
Yeah, and if you think about it, they're learning, just like how the Austrians learned from their defeats. The Spanish are gonna learn from theirs eventually, and then they're gonna be strong enough to beat Napoleon, just like the Austrians did against Napoleon, like a year ago, I think.
Victor's First Corps, besieging Cadiz, had now been so weakened to support other operations that the Anglo-Spanish garrison decided to attack. The Allies landed along the coast to strike at the French siege lines from the rear. But they were ambushed by the French at Barossa. Despite heavy losses, the Anglo-Portuguese rearguard fought off the enemy, but a furious falling out between British commander Sir Thomas Graham and his Spanish counterpart General La Peña threw away any advantage. Soult, alarmed at these developments, marched back to Andalusia. Meanwhile, Massena, out of food and with no prospect of reinforcement, had no option but to retreat.
Darn.
Wellington's army pursued, discovering evidence of several appalling atrocities committed by the French against Portuguese villagers.
Come on, what the rude. Remember last time you did atrocities, everyone got mad at you, so don't do it again. Seriously, that is just rude.
There were running battles with the French rearguard, brilliantly commanded by Marshal Ney, until he was sacked by Massena for criticizing his leadership.
Oh. Wow.
Having chased the French out of Portugal, Wellington besieged Almeida. Massena's army, now rested and reinforced, marched to its aid. The two armies clashed again at Fuentes de Oñoro. In 2 days of heavy fighting, Massena failed to break through Wellington's position to relieve Almeida. The fortress fell the next week, but to Wellington's fury, British bungling allowed most of the French garrison to escape. Massena had lost 25,000 men in Portugal. Now he'd lost Almeida too, and a string of bad decisions, not least to bring his mistress with him on campaign.
Why is he smiling? Dude.
Had cost him the respect of his officers. The Marshal, whom Napoleon had once nicknamed the dear child of victory, was recalled to France in disgrace, never to hold senior command again.
Dang.
Napoleon sent Marshal Marmont to replace him. But the British commander of Portugal's army was sent to retake Badajoz with 20,000 British and Portuguese troops. When Soult approached with a relief force, Beresford marched to meet him at Albuera. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the war. Around 6,000 casualties on each side, with more than a third of the British infantry killed, wounded, or captured.
It's so interesting, like, these scales of battles are so interesting. Like, if you look at World War I or II, these battles would sometimes cost, like, sometimes even, like, hundreds of thousands of lives. Like, if you think about what happened at Kiev, over 600,000 dead on each side. Probably a little closer to 700,000 or 800,000, to be honest. And yeah, especially on the Eastern Front of World War II and the Eastern Front of World War I, just hundreds of thousands. But in this, the Napoleonic Wars, battles seem so much smaller, the casualties, and of course that's probably because of the technology gap. But wow, like 12,000 casualties in total is what they consider one of the biggest battles of the that is just crazy to me.
Marshal Soult declared, "There is no beating these troops."
What the heck? What is this accent? How come all the other quotes didn't have any accents, but now all of a sudden...
In spite of our generals,
Okay.
I always thought they were bad soldiers. Now I'm sure of it. I had burned their right, pierced their center, and everywhere victory was mine. But they didn't know how to run.
Soult had been checked, but he was determined to save Badajoz. The newly arrived Marshal Marmont marched to his aid, and they advanced again. This combined army forced the British to abandon the siege. But when Wellington withdrew to a strong defensive position across the Portuguese border, Soult and Marmont did not pursue.
What?
French commanders in Spain had learned grudging respect for Wellington and for the steadiness of his troops. For now, the war in Spain had entered stalemate.
Oh. But the French did take, like, a lot more land. Also, I never mentioned, like, whenever Napoleonic France annexed Catalonia from Spain. Spain, general's fortune, officer's ruin, soldier's death. Oh, French barracks graffiti.
While British, French, and Spanish armies crisscrossed Spain and Portugal, another war was fought every day in the mountains, hills, and woods.
And where
From
is that?
1808, Spanish and Portuguese civilians, militias, and ex-soldiers began taking up arms against the hated French invader. They
Wait, well, didn't it say that there were some people in Spain that liked the French?
waged a war of ambushes and hit-and-run raids, known in Spanish as la guerrilla.
Oh, so is that where that comes from?
Little War. Its fighters became known in English as guerrillas. Britain's Royal Navy supplied vital weapons,
That's where that word comes from.
stores, and money, often landing them behind enemy lines. Much of Spain's rugged countryside fell under the control of the guerrillas.
Oh.
North of Madrid, Juan Martín Díez, an ex-soldier known as El Empecinado, the Stubborn, led a guerrilla band 6,000 strong. In Navarre, Esposimina,
It seems like a lot of land to occupy just for 6,000 soldiers.
a former peasant, ran a highly organized band that caused havoc for the French, capturing convoys and couriers on the strategic Burgos-Bayonne road,
Rude.
and branding Viva Mina on the forehead of collaborators. While in the west, Julian Sanchez, known as El Charro, led the self-styled Lanceros de Castilla. El Charro himself wore a French hussar's cap,
Why?
its eagle symbolically turned upside down.
Oh.
There were dozens more bands operating across Spain, though a few were no better than bandits, terrorizing civilians as often
Jeez,
as
look
the
at that.
enemy. Guerrilla war was merciless, marked by hideous atrocities on both sides. A French soldier's greatest fear was to be taken alive by the guerrillas,
Almost reminds me of the Eastern Front in World War II.
who often tortured their prisoners before killing them.
Wow, that is very rude.
Tens of thousands of French troops were tied down by this people's war, guarding outposts or patrolling the countryside. The roads were so dangerous for French messengers that they required cavalry escorts of 200 men or more. Many still didn't get through,
Jeez.
their valuable dispatches forwarded to Wellington, for whom they became an invaluable source of intelligence. The war in Spain would ultimately cost the lives of 240,000 French soldiers. As was typical in wars of this era, most died from disease, but more died fighting guerrillas than in battle against the British and Spanish armies.
Wow. Look at that. Whoops. That is a lot of people. Quarter of a
However,
million.
it was the twin threat, a well-led regular army under Wellington and a popular insurgency, that left the French facing an impossible strategic dilemma.
Yeah.
If their armies remained dispersed to fight the guerrillas, Wellington could attack. But if they concentrated to defeat Wellington in battle, huge swathes of the country would quickly fall to the guerrillas. This was Napoleon's Vietnam, or his bleeding ulcer, as he called it, a war that cost his empire an average of 100 casualties every day. with little prospect of victory. And in 1812, as Napoleon launched his gigantic invasion of Russia, Wellington and the guerrillas launched their own offensive that would turn the war in Spain on its head.
Oh, goodness.
Thank
Well, it appears that we're at the end. So, thank you all for watching. That was pretty cool. Tomorrow's video, let's see, will be about Salamanca, apparently. Very interesting. Wellington strikes. Oh. And then after that, the invasion of Russia. Very interesting. Yeah, thank you all for watching. And goodbye. Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. And turn on the notification bell thingy. And if you didn't, then make sure to leave a thumbs down. But yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, go ahead and watch my other videos. They're probably just as good, and if not better than this one right now. Except for my oldest videos, don't watch those. And, subscribe to these people down here, my fellow sergeants. They're other YouTubers that I either know or I have in high regards. Yeah, even my cat agrees. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.